Good morning. This is Bill from Curious Cars and Auto House of Naples on another lovely Florida Thursday. I truly can't complain. I know that I do tend to complain about the weather a little bit. It's something I've dabbled with over the last few years. You know, you might have heard me do a little bitching and moaning about the weather here in Naples, Florida, but at the moment, I absolutely can't. It's just lovely outside. In fact, we've some sort of an Arctic chill is coming through. Today is a Thursday. I don't know if the video's getting up today, so don't hold it against me if it seems like a wrong day. But supposedly we have some sort of an Arctic chill coming through this weekend that's going to bring temperatures down into the 30s. So I am in absolute heaven. Right now, I believe it's in the 60s. It's nice. There's not even any humidity around. This is just the rare time of year where I can't say a thing about how the weather is going. And if I did, I'd be a bit of a jerk. I understand it's much, much colder up north. So here it is, there it is, and we're good to go. Animal front, haven't seen a damn thing since that rabbit suicide the other day. Nothing, not a goat, not a bird. I did have a flock of ibises, which are really creepy looking. I don't know if they're around everywhere else. They're certainly in Florida, and they congregate in packs. There's packs of them that come and peck at shit inside your yard and whatnot. And they've got these big, long, menacing beaks, but even though they were kind of close, they ended up fluttering away a little bit, and I didn't have to contend with them. So other than the ibises and, of course, that suicidal rabbit last week, really haven't had too much to complain about. And as such, we get to dive and leap straight into this car, which is fantastic for me. This is a bit of a rare bird, I have to say, speaking of birds. This is a 1985 Cadillac Eldorado touring coupe. As it would turn out, one of 585 that were made in 1985, so there really aren't too many of these things. And when I had an opportunity to get one recently, I just had to. I mean, I vaguely remember a friend of mine back in the day whose dad drove one, who was a bit of a cool cat, and that was probably the only touring coupe I had ever seen before this one came along. So here it is, and we're going to check it out. So look, let's just dive into why this car exists, even if it exists in such little numbers. As far back as the 1970s, Cadillac knew there was going to be a reckoning for the brand. The top brass sort of saw it coming and thought they could do something to head it off. They had enjoyed the standard of the world moniker for decades, absolutely decades. I mean, Cadillac was it, and it was just a very, very big deal to own a Cadillac at that point. It was much more than just an advertising shtick. They had been building luxurious and glamorous cars for decades, absolutely. I mean, since truly almost the beginning of the car era. Movie stars, presidents, captains of industry, bishops, gangsters, people like that were most often seen in Cadillacs, and their appeal and name recognition was global. You could say that something was the Cadillac, this potato chip is the Cadillac of potato chips. I mean, it was just one of those things. It's the kind of thing that marketing and advertising agencies would love to have and work with. But mostly Cadillacs were exclusive. Owners had worked their way up through the GM chain. Chevrolet was, the least expensive, kind of their entry level. I mean, I know there were some expensive Chevys, but, there was basically an aspirational chain in GM where you began with a certain mark, you progressed through life and went up higher, and finally, the most aspirational of all, was a Cadillac, and that's after you had visited Buick and Pontiac and Oldsmobile and that sort of thing. But by the time you had bought a Cadillac, you had absolutely made it. All of that would start going wrong for the company, very incrementally at first, almost like, what's that with the frog, going into boiling water type thing. I mean, one of the issues was creative financing. That started to make these cars more attainable. And while that was great for sales, it was a problem for the brand overall, because when a bank president would show up at the golf course and his golf pro was also driving a Cadillac, that didn't seem so exclusive anymore. And that was a real problem for them. And that made the bank president types gravitate towards something a little bit more exclusive, and that's how many of them ended up with European brands. Mercedes and BMW began to take buyers away from Cadillac, and brass at GM saw that coming. And of course, as the downsizing and malaise era started to kick in, that made things worse in a hurry, because basically you had a brand that was known for their big, large, luxurious, inefficient cars in a time when that started to become unfashionable. And again, that was an issue. And of course, there were still buyers for that. I mean, they were out there. I mean, Cadillac still sold very well. The problem is that the buyers were getting older, and Cadillac saw that newer, younger buyers weren't replacing the older guys who were, still buying the cars. And while that wasn't an issue immediately, it would certainly become one. Harley Davidson also went through the same thing, and still is to some extent. And this became a crisis for Cadillac before it got better. Putting aside the 67 Eldo for a minute, which did have a bit of a sporty flair to it, but that was more of a muscle car type flair than a European flair. So we're going to, fast forward a few years. Their first stab at really hitting the European brands would have been the 76 Cadillac Seville, which was really a beautifully styled car, and it was based on a similar chassis to the Nova and the Camaro Firebird, of all things. I mean, if you looked underneath, you could almost recognize your Camaro. You could put ladder bars on it if you wanted. But it was a good-looking car, and it actually sold very well. It was still ornate. It still had all of the stuff on it that made a Cadillac a Cadillac. And even though the figures were good and the car was considered a success, it still didn't draw the buyer that Cadillac was hoping for. The younger guy who was sort of, kind of like the way that Tesla is robbing cars from Mercedes now, or robbing marketing. Mercedes had become the aspirational car, but now, of course, Tesla, with its farty electronic gadgetry, is encroaching on them, and Mercedes is trying to figure out what to do about it. Much in the same way, Mercedes and BMW were eating into Cadillac back during this time. So anyway, what that did was led to an incredible blunder by Cadillac, or at least what's considered so today, and that would have been the Cimarron, if you remember that thing. It came out in 1982. It was one of the most egregious cases of badge engineering in world history. That's where they took basically a Chevy Cavalier and they loaded it up with Cadillac equipment and tried to have it be this European style American sporty car at an entry-level price that would sort of compete with the, like the Mercedes 190 or the BMW 3 Series that this emerging class of yuppies was starting to buy. Well, it didn't work. The yuppies weren't fooled. They weren't interested in a Cavalier with some extra bits and trim on it. And, it did double in its role. It wasn't just for European competition, but there were tightening CAFE standards at the time, the government standards for fuel economy. And this Cimarron was supposed to help with that, which of course it did. But the way that it helped with that was by having a standard 4-cylinder engine with a manual gearbox, window cranks, and power locks as an option. Power windows and locks were optional on the 82 Cimarron. And so nobody was fooled. I mean, it was, if you want a nice Cavalier, go buy a nice Cavalier at a much lower price. You could probably even get one with power windows at the time. So Cadillac just absolutely bombed that car. But that brings us to this one, because when that came out, when the Cadillac had pinned some kind of hopes on the Cimarron, which of course went to nothing, it needed a companion, so to speak. I mean, you couldn't have just this one Euro car in the showroom. You had to have something else. Enter this, the 10th generation. There's some debate about what generation it is. I'm going with 10th. That's what I think it is. This 10th generation Eldorado, which was one of the rare successes of downsizing. It came out in 1979. It replaced that enormous Eldorado that preceded it, and actually sold really, really well right from the get-go. In fact, this was the best-selling Eldorado of all time. It outsold any Eldo that came before or after, and these things were made all the way through the early 2000s. So they thought, what the hell, we're going to sporty it up a little bit, which they did, and you can see that this one, and we'll get into the styling more in a minute, it has body-colored trim where, the other Eldos would have had chrome. It has black muted trim down the rocker panels. It has alloy wheels. The white letter tires are not an anomaly on this car. They actually came on these Eldorado touring coupes. They did come with white letter tires, so, a real departure for Cadillac. So it came out in '82, and it frankly did not overwhelm. It sold poorly. I mean, I think there were 1,200 units sold the first year. The automotive press liked it. They had no issue with it. But the American public wasn't convinced. And, the guys who wanted European cars, they went out and bought European cars. They didn't go and buy Cadillacs that were dolled up to look a little bit more European. So when it hit the dealer lots, it cost like 50 grand plus in today dollars, which wasn't cheap. But you did, of course, get some upgrades for that. But look, before we get into the car and dive into it, and I do like doing this, let's have a quick look at 1985 and see what was going on when this car was fresh, new, and, ostensibly taking on the Europeans. In the Soviet Union, you had Mikhail Gorbachev came to power. Of course, if you remember that guy, he and Reagan spawned a whole bunch of music videos throughout the 1980s. And he was supposed to bring in a cuddlier, friendlier, happier Soviet Union, which, of course, fooled most of the American press, but, very few other people. He was an interesting cat. He also had this incredible birthmark that just absolutely freaked people out. Also in 1985, and you have to actually consider this big news, new Coke came out. And, if you have this incredible product that's basically synonymous with the word soft drink, selling incredibly well, intense global recognition, why the hell not replace it? Why not absolutely change it? And Coca-Cola did. So they came out with this thing called New Coke. They actually took the old formula off the market, to the puzzlement and absolute derision of just about everybody. And the whole thing went over about as well as the Cimarron did for Cadillac. I mean, it just was awful. People made a big joke out of it, and correctly so. And it vanished fairly quickly. It was replaced, well, first of all, they sold Coca-Cola Classic alongside of it, and then New Coke just vanished completely. So, it was kind of an interesting little tidbit in corporate American marketing. Hijackings were a big thing in '85. You had TWA 847, you had Egypt Air 648, the cruise ship Achille Laura. All held hostage with loss of life, no good. There were bombings all over the Middle East and just violence everywhere. There were some birds coming in. Back in the States, you had a young rookie in the NBA. He got Rookie of the Year, a guy named Michael Jordan. He went on to have a bit of a career. The Unabomber, if you remember that guy, he killed his first victim and went on to model for one of the great police sketches in crime history. One aspired to sort of look as cool as the Unabomber did in that video with the hoodie and the sunglasses and all that. The Titanic was located by a French and American team on the bottom of the ocean, of course, and some photos came out, and it was all vast interest to everybody. And then most interestingly in the news, the Philadelphia Police Department actually bombed a building, a house that was being occupied by this terrorist group called MOVE, I believe. And they sent up a helicopter and they dropped a bomb on the thing. I mean, when you read about it now, you think, oh my God. This is just not something it's easy to wrap your head around. So anyway, this bomb went off. It killed a bunch of people, and it ended up burning down like another 53 houses or something. So Philadelphia Police Department not taking any shit in 1985 and showing that decade we were probably a little more tough on crime than we were today. Movies, you had Rambo, you had Rocky IV, you had Back to the Future, Cocoon, and who amongst us doesn't enjoy a good Wilford Brimley movie? I mean, that guy was just fantastic. New TV shows, Moonlighting, which is interesting because, of course, the main characters, you had what's his face, Bruce Willis and that broad. They drove that BMW 630. They weren't in an Eldorado touring coupe, which Cadillac would have absolutely loved. But you had that. You had the Golden Girls. You had MacGyver. If that didn't become a shtick, I don't know what did. And of course, The Equalizer. I watched that. I know it's ancient now. That the new Equalizer movie, probably 20 years old, that has Denzel Washington in it. He was incredibly violent. I mean, everybody's dying in horrible ways. And I wasn't an Equalizer fan back in the 80s. I didn't really watch it, but I have a feeling that nobody died in really brutal, gruesome ways. So, there's a nice modernization of it. Music, you had Live Aid. That was a bunch of people came together to help famine, bring some attention to themselves as well. You had Duran Duran, you had Madonna, Bruce Springsteen. Dire Straits was out with that Money for No. I think that came out later. But anyway, Dire Straits was big at the time. Huey Lewis and the News, they were enormous. Phil Collins was getting to be pretty big after leaving Genesis. You had David Bowie, and of course you had The Cure, who found out that depressing teenagers for album sales was pretty friggin' easy. Being 14 at the time, I knew every song. When I look back through this list, it was I couldn't tell you a single new artist probably, but you go back to like 84, 85, I knew every damn one of them. So anyway, there's a little picture of what was going on at the time as this car was rolling around, and I'm going to take a 2-minute pause here, get my shit together, and then we're going to dive into this particular car. So bear with me one moment. All right, we're back. So look, let's just jump directly into this particular car. Again, this is a 1985 Eldorado Touring Coupe, one of 585 made. Most of them were black. I think there were under 100 that were finished in this dark red metallic color, so it truly is a bit of a rare bird. I mean, we're talking more like Ferrari production numbers than Cadillac production. I mean, if you go look overall Eldos, they made a bunch of them, but in this particular configuration, there just weren't many. And you can see why this Eldorado, if not the Touring Coupe, sold very well. I think it's just a fantastically attractive car, and again, one of the few success stories of downsizing. It has these sharp knife-edged fenders that extend beyond the headlamps. You've got the 4 quad lamps up front. You've got fairly well-integrated front bumper in chrome. The trailing line, it's angular with just a hint of curvature as it moves towards the back. Getting into the touring coupe. So look, you've got the headlight surrounds. They would be chrome on the standard Eldorado. On this one there, body color. It would have been interesting if they'd made the bumper body color as well, but I guess that was a bridge too far. Also, instead of a hood ornament, you got the, what's it called, like a cloisonne or some fancy French word for a badge that would have been like the ones on BMW and Mercedes. You got that instead of a big upright hood ornament. This one also has the headlamp and lighting indicators built into the side of the fenders in kind of an elegant way. I like the lines in the hood. I think they look quite nice. I like the way the windshield wipers are covered with this swoopy little panel here. I think that looks good. You can see no chrome around the front windshield. You do have chrome around the sides. And also, interestingly, those big square mirrors. It would have been interesting if Cadillac had put the bullet mirrors on that would have been on the Firebirds at the time, or something like that. Might have been a bit more Euro sporty, but again, you got what you got. You see it as this big dark trim down the bottom, kind of attractive and interesting. You also get these alloy wheels, which came only on the touring coupe, and I know there's going to be a lot of flack for these white letter tires, but they are in fact what the car came with. I do know you could get some black walls as well. Of course, you could flip these around, but these things were sold with white letter tires, exposed chrome lug nuts, and this otherwise very sporty looking wheel and tire combo you just wouldn't have expected on an Eldorado. You can see that the chrome around the wheel arch has also been made body color, as has that little impact strip down the side. All very, very cool. It's not a true hardtop because those little quarter windows in the back don't go down, but it does have frameless glass and the sides do open pretty good. This one also had the Astro roof option, which is a nice feature. And you can see also the chrome door handles. And the Eldorado touring coupes down the road, when they went further downsized, those things actually became body color, and I thought that was kind of neat. There was no vinyl roof option on the touring coupes. You had a tin roof only. Another one of those cloisonne badges there on the C-pillar, and of course that extreme notchback look that this E-body Eldorado, and also it shared it with the Riviera and I believe the Toronado. They all had this sort of really sharp notchback look. Being the 80s, this thing did at one point have a cell phone antenna. The antenna remains, the cell phone doesn't, but I think it adds a nice touch, and it's period correct, and it really doesn't bother me that it's there. I like the way that the rear quarters swoop up in the back a little bit and then trail down in a knife edge towards the rear, where you had tail lamps special to the touring coupe with body color instead of chrome surrounds, and of course the Cadillac badge in them. You also get back into a rear chrome bumper, still being a car of its time. It has the pullback license plate with the gas door around it, the Eldorado script. All in all, I just think it's a very, very handsome car, and maybe I'm biased, and maybe I'm happy to have actually found a touring coupe because there just aren't many going around, but I do like it, and I can see why this generation Aldo sold so well. Got a bunch of keys with this thing, and somebody had upgraded it as well to having one of these remotes, like, I don't know if it's an alarm or just keyless entry. It works with the door locks. It doesn't seem to work in the trunk, so they didn't install it to that level. You got a little wreath and crest thing here with the flip up, very old school, to put the key in. Try not to scratch the paint as I do this. I think it also would have been cool to put a different set of emblems on there that weren't the same ones as the other Aldo, like they did on future touring coupes. Here in the back, you had a nice sized trunk, and when I get into the mechanicals, I'll point out that it has four-wheel independent suspension. Part of that was, of course, for making it handle better, but another part of it was to make sure the thing still had trunk room, and it does. You can see, even with that sort of ungainly donut spare mounted and looking like it's going to fall on anyone who goes in there, it's still a pretty good amount of room that you can put some crap in, and I would say that was an absolute necessity for Cadillac at the time. You see the original floor mats are still there, and because this car is front wheel drive, it has no transmission hump, and Yeah. No tranny hump, no transmission hump, and that thing goes all the way across. You also see somebody who cared put the jacking instructions on this one, and here is the original build sheet for this particular car that's been put up there. So anyway, very, very nice stuff, and also does have one of these little electric suck downs, as you would have expected in an Eldorado at the time. You just kind of click it in, and there it is, sucks it down. Have a look under the hood. All right, I'm not going to say that this is controversial under here. I mean, it just is what it is. This has the Cadillac HT, which stands for High Technology 4100 engine. A bunch of different engines went in these Eldorados. They even had a V6 for the first time in Cadillac history that you could get, the base engine. There were diesels, there were bigger V8s. One year they had that 864 cylinder deactivation crap that everybody hated, and it went away. Of course, the diesels were converted gas engines, and they were horrible. So Cadillac just kind of finally zeroed in on the 4100, which is another controversial engine. So it's got iron heads with an aluminum block, which is not an optimum setup, but this one seems to have lasted unless it was replaced at some point in the past. It puts out about 135 horsepower, so it's pretty friggin' anemic. The Riviera T-Type, same body, had like 180, 170 something horsepower. So it's just odd that a Buick had more oomph than the Cadillac in their touring editions, and I think that was a shame. But you know, you got what you got. It went through a turbohydra transmission that was kind of, you know, every Eldorado since '67 has been front drive, and it puts the engine in the traditional front to back style, but it uses sort of a chain and a turnaround to make the engine drive the front wheels. And weirdly, it actually seems to be a pretty reliable setup, even though it sounds kind of Rube Goldberg and convoluted. But anyway, there it is. That's the engine this one has. It's the engine all of them had in '85, and it seems to be working just fine at the moment. Okay, I'm going to pause again for a minute to get my crap in the trunk. Then we're going to have a little tour of the inside and go for a drive, so bear with me. This is troubling. This thing came in to scout and see what's going on. There's probably a pack of these things waiting behind a tree somewhere to come at me. He keeps standing on his hind leg. I don't know if that's normal. It's a rat with a bushy tail. He looks pissed off and weird. Go on now. Go on. Look at this thing. God, that's a big... There he goes. Oh, thank God. Yeah, that is a disturbing little bastard. I'll keep an eye on that. Make sure he doesn't leap down and attach himself to my face and start clawing my eyes out. All right, well, one thing, and I almost forgot this, and thank God I didn't, because it's the whole point of the damn car, is the suspension and the mechanical setup on this thing. So before I hop in, let me just go over that really quick. And that is, of course, what separated the touring coupes from the standard Eldorados. And in fact, it was the whole point of the damn things. I'm glad I almost missed it, beyond the body color trim. So look, by virtue of being an Eldorado, it had four-wheel independent suspension, which was great. You know, it did hold the road fairly well for a Cadillac at the time. It also had four-wheel disc brakes. It had bigger sway bars up front and in the back, which of course minimized, or, you know, it still body rolled like the Titanic, but it wasn't as bad as a standard Eldorado. It was tighter, as was the steering. It had a recirculating ball steering that had a tighter ratio than the other Eldorados. So the car actually did handle very well. It even got a touring suspension badge as a result, and that was something that the car manufacturers did like at the time. Motorweek did a road test on one, and to my surprise, they kind of liked the car. Even the drivers did, and I'll put a link to that in in the description of this video. So, you know, the car did have some mechanical upgrades that made it handle and perform a little bit better. Although, again, same drivetrain with the same anemic horsepower, so your acceleration times were no better than what you'd get on a standard Eldo, and they were really crap. But let's have a look inside and see what we got. And that is where things do get a little bit different, as well as with the suspension. So in here, in very untraditional Cadillac style, you have two bucket seats separated by a center console. I believe these were actually sourced for the Cimarron, or from the Cimarron. Well, they were made for the Cimarron, and then they just put them in this Eldo to make it be a little bit more sporty. And I think it actually works out well. The trim, the way, you know, the lines in the center inserts of the seat was something they would continue with touring coupes for years, and basically going on and on after this, they used the very similar inside. But I think it looks great. I think it looks very, very cool, and it's not what you expect when you open a mid-80s Aldo. Getting into the back seats, you know, they're kind of set up to be for two passengers, but of course there are 3 seat belts, so you can fit your 3 Canadians across the back. And in fact, this is a Canadian car, so model, not you know, all Eldos. This particular Eldorado was sold in Canada initially, so they're going to feel very comfortable back there. You've got some pockets at the back of the seats, which are good for gun storage or drugs, or, you know, whatever you need to put in there, infants, toddlers. You have a package shelf that's quite small, so you're really not going to get any shit up there, but you do have a couple of those Bose speakers, which you know, pump out the sounds. You also, if you see those 2 little lights up there, that's the Cadillac taillight monitoring system. Uses fiber optics to let you know that the lights and brake lights are working. You also have ashtrays on either side, because apparently people still smoked in the 80s, and that's you know, that makes me happy. So everyone's going to be fairly chipper back there. You don't have much of a tranny hump. Excuse me. And you're going to be able to, you know, have your 3 people across without too much hassle. Again, the buckets, very, very supportive. 6-way power on the driver's door with manual recline. You've got, of course, your 3-point seat belts. You've got that very strange dash that's sort of inherent to these E-bodies with a big overhang. You also get side window defrost, which is nice. Door panel, pretty nice treatment. You get very traditional Cadillac pull handle, works fine. This dates back to, you know, Cadillac didn't update a lot of crap. This is the same one you could have gotten in a car 20 years before. But anyways, your power seat control, a little bit of wood in there. They really didn't bother minimizing the wood on the inside the way they minimized the chrome on the outside. Here's a chrome door handle pull. And this did have that Bose speaker system, which was coming into vogue at the time. And man, look at the size of that speaker hump on the door. Every speaker had its own amp on it. It actually sounds pretty good, and probably suits the Eldorado better than, for instance, the Corvette, where it takes up a lot more space. Anyway, let's hop in. Actually, nice solid door close in that thing, and let's fire this car up. There's a nice little Cadillac bing. You also get digital instrumentation, which was part of the Touring Coupe package. I don't believe you could get anything analog in the Touring Coupe. This is what you got. And it's also the exact same dashboard I had in my 85 Riviera, which I love. So this is a nice walk down memory lane for me. Over here, you've got your wiper controls, wash. You've got auto dimming for the high beams, and twilight sentinel to turn your lights on. So all very luxurious stuff. You also have cruise control. Your on-off switches there. You've got a tilt steering column, very nice. Also telescoping, another word I screw up all the time. And you can set it to where you want it. Kind of minimum leather feel to it. I don't think it's that much different from that. Yeah, no, the wheels in the Eldo, the other Eldos probably had the chrome and wood inserts in them. So this is a little bit more sporty, but it's not really the big, thick, sporty wheel you might have expected. You got a power adjust mirror on the driver's side, and also on the manual side. And the manual side. also on the passenger side, and those are heated, so very, very nice stuff. Over here you've got your very basic digital display. I mean, it's really not giving you much, and you have to remember the Corvette with its F16 digital dash was out at the time, so they could have had something a little bit more intricate. But of course the first digital display in these Eldos came out in '79, so the engineering was probably already done by the time the technology was leaping forward. You've got 2 information centers that give you all your warning lights if anything comes up. You've got your odometer and trip odometer up there. See, this one's in kilometers, which, God, this is all very disturbing. Fortunately, it has an English and metric over here. Yeah, you can switch, see that you can have your miles per hour and fuel in gallons and all the stuff that makes a lot more sense to me than the metric system, which I hate. What else do we have? Over here we've got climate control. Nice stuff. You've got your trip, basically your fuel data. Gives you your terrible mileage as you're getting it. Right now we're getting 0, which is par for the course. Got a very small and digital climate control center. It gives you outside temp. You can see we're at 64, which is absolutely lovely, and all very push button, all very nice. Here's that Delco Bose sound system with cassette. Let's see what we got on the radio.
I know, Kia of Cape Coral.
Yeah, we've got commercials. That's
and wait 12 months to pay.
Always commercials. Anyway, it sounds very good for the time, and even still sounds pretty good for today, so no complaints with that. You also have a big ashtray because, again, people smoked in the 80s. I'm not usually the type to leave cheap plastic accessories in cars, but I actually like this. It actually works pretty good because it gives you a couple of cup holders and some room to put shit. Your coins here. I don't know if anyone's still using coins, but if you do, you've got coins, and you've got a little bit of gun and narcotic storage under there. I don't know what goes in here, but you got some room for shit there, and then you got some spots here for more pills or whatever. Interestingly, here's the center console with the wreaths and the crests. Uses a really weird release mechanism and opens from the front, and there you have room for more coins, so that, you got plenty of coin storage in this thing, and also pretty good gun storage in here. You could fit a large frame revolver, maybe even a mini ARs, and I doubt it, but anyway, you get a pretty good gun in there, and not too shabby. You also have a reverse back here, which of course Dalton didn't bother to clean up, but that's another good place to put little bags of cash, or look at that, or USB adapter you happen to find. But anyway, there you go. Lots of stuff can go in there, and everyone's going to be pretty chipper. You also get an armrest. There's your touring suspension badge. That's going to let your passengers know that you're a bit of a badass. You got some Eldorado script. You got your trunk release. You got your owner's manual. If you're having a picnic, you got a place to set your cups. And then you've got these weird little chrome vent turnoffs there, which all work fine. You've got, of course, a couple of vanity mirrors. You've got this weird little spot where you would put, I don't know what, in the day you could put maybe your garage door opener. What a terrific place to hide shit from a state trooper, and they're very unlikely they're going to find it. You also have a rear view mirror with auto dimming. Nice stuff. Gives you the distance. You can adjust that with this little knob here and turn it off or have it on auto. You also have an Astra roof, which is glass with a shade. I think it actually still works in this car. It does. And you open up that sucker, and you've got a giant hole into the lovely Florida air at the moment. Sounds like a busted chainsaw, but it works. Actually works pretty good. And I did have one of those in my Buick too, so I absolutely love seeing it. And then when you don't want it, just put the shade over it and you're good to go. Alright, so let me get my seatbelt on. We're going to take this thing for a drive and do some touring. Standard column shifter, wouldn't expect anything else. Would have been nice if they'd done center console shift, but you know, that would have required an awful lot of engineering for the sake of selling 585 cars, which wouldn't make too much sense, of course. So just wait for Peter's gate. This is another one Dalton didn't detail, so there's a chance the windshield is okay. Looks like Peter's got some sort of a package there getting pushed by the gate. I just watched some woman drop that off. Hopefully it's not getting crushed. We'll see if it pushes it into the... Oh, I'm going to have to move that. All right, let me get it outside the gate. I'm going to pause for a minute, and then we're going to pick it up. I can't just leave this crap in the side lane. There's another. Maybe that could be that same squirrel straight ahead. Look at that thing. I understand they've killed a few people. All right. Anyway, bear with me. We'll pick it up again in a second. So finally we got something on the radio, and it's Whitesnake, which is nicely appropriate, and of course is a very welcome thought of the 80s version of Tawny Katane. But anyway, let's get back to the car. So you know, it's essentially now, and the door locks hit when you go into drive, it's essentially a Grand Tourer, I suppose. I mean, it's, you know, it's got a modicum of sportiness outside. It's got a sporty but very comfortable interior with seating for, you know, 4 properly, but 5. But, you know, so it's your Grand Touring Cadillac. You got your touring suspension. You've got V8 power under the hood, which has less horsepower than most modern 3-cylinders. It does go down the road. You know, that is another reason that these cars sold so well. They weren't just good looking, which of course they were, but the ride was terrific. You know, part of it being the independent suspension, part of it being the tuning, but the cars just drove very well. There's a little kick down from the 4100. You know, the steering, is it tighter than a normal Eldorado? Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I don't frankly really notice. I mean, maybe it's not the same, you know, turn it with your pinky kind of super over assisted feel, so it just feels sort of marginally over assisted compared to any modern car. It does soak up bumps incredibly well. You don't get any harshness from, you know, what they're calling a touring suspension, so it's obviously still geared towards giving the occupants a nice ride, and that it does. It's a lovely vista out the windshield. I like the way those fenders, you know, rise above the hood, the V of the hood going forward. A little bit weird to have Cadillac without a hood ornament, you know, of this era. You can actually, that badge is so tall you can actually see it as you're driving, and you know, it does have a nice feeling to it, and that's one of the reasons that these cars have become more collectible as time goes on, is because they're lovely to drive. You know, they were lovely to drive back then, and they're lovely to drive today. 0 to 60, you know, you have to plan it on your calendar. Braking, you do have 4-wheel discs, which are not bad, and it does hold the car down pretty good. I remember watching that Motorweek, the fuel economy they observed was actually decent. They got 20 overall. It's rated for high teens in the city and like 28 on the highway, so the economy isn't as bad as you think for an old V8 powered car without too many modern you know, fuel economy add-ons, and the drive's just nice, man. It's just nice. A shame about the traffic. Get past some of these cars, so I'm going to keep quiet for a minute, and we'll just go for a cruise. In behind this dump truck. Hopefully some rocks and sand and shit falls out as we're going. This truck will soak it up. So anyway, look, I'm not going to bore you as I'm navigating my way through early morning traffic. It's not that early morning anymore, but here it is. So this is a 1985 Cadillac Eldorado Touring Coupe, one of 585 made in 1985, under 100 in this dark red metallic color. So we're talking about a pretty rare beast. It's in nice shape. It's a good driver, really fun to own, and I'm really thrilled to have found one and had it, because these things are just not out there. I mean, this one was the first one that I'd seen in, God, 35 years or more. I mean, it's just been a long time since, you see one of these things driving around. So absolutely cool to have one. We got some more fun stuff coming up. I know I've been a little bit lax on the videos so far, but we're going to work on that, get some more cars coming. Really appreciate everyone having a look. Love the comments, read them, appreciate them, and thank you guys very, very much for keeping me going and giving me something to have fun. One of the few things, honestly, going on right now that I have any joy with. So really appreciate that. This car will be for sale at Auto House of Naples. If you have any interest, give those guys a call. They love hearing from everybody. So nice guys, and we will see you with the next one. Take care, and thank you very much.